Offering a tribute, member from Niagara West Glanbrook.
Well, thank you, Speaker. Francis Xavier Sheehan was one of 10 kids in his family. As Bradley noted, the first three, the elder three sisters, all were literally sisters. They're nuns. 2 Basilian priests as brothers. So when Frank passed, he certainly had a lot of folks that could put a good word in for him to get through the pearly gates. But I think Frank made it on his own, so I'm going to tell you a little bit why I'm going to say that. Believe it or not, Frank actually did follow the family tradition and enrolled in seminary. He was there for 6 months. It didn't take. A little too much mischief, I think, in those eyes. Others knew Frank for it to last, and eldest son Gordon said, thank God it didn't. The gallery would be less full today. But Frank had an extraordinarily big heart. So he came back from seminary. He's trying to figure out what to do with the rest of his life. And as was mentioned by my colleague from Niagara Centre, he went to work for his dad in the Sheehan plumbing and heating business in St. Catharines. And I didn't know Frank's dad, but I'm going to guess they were quite similar. Because Gordon relayed a conversation to me where Frank came on board and just didn't work out so much in the business. So his dad said to him one day, you know, Francis, you got a big mouth. And Francis replied, well, you paid enough for it. And then Dad said, I don't think this is working out. And Frank said, me neither. And he up and quit. A little while later, his dad said to him, Frank, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? Frank said, I don't know. So he says, why don't you go and join your uncle? Your uncle Hubert had just taken over the family insurance business, Sheehan Insurance. And Frank said, I don't know anything about insurance. And his dad said, well, neither does Hubert, so why don't you go ahead? And that took. I mean, Frank was a legend in the insurance business, built up Sheehan Rosie, extraordinarily generous through the company, through himself, took a leadership position provincially, I think nationally, if memory serves, with the insurance brokers as well, and then found his way here in 1995 in the cast of 82 characters we called the government in June of 1995. Premier Mike Harris today, no surprise to see the Premier here, because he said he looked at his entire team, and the one person in his caucus that had the principles and the backbone to be his leader of the Red Tape Commission, by and far, easy call, Frank Sheehan. And he made the right call. I'll tell you a quick story in Cabinet one day, and Frank was there. To Premier Harris's credit, the head of the Red Tape Commission was at those Cabinet meetings. And one veteran minister, not the present company, no longer here in the Assembly, was bringing through a new bill. And the bill had all kinds of new rules and regulations in it. And then Frank took him on right there at the Cabinet table and said, this has got to go through what he called a regulatory knothole. That was his term. And the minister got frustrated. I mean, who's this? He's not a minister. What's he doing at the table? I can get what I want. And the minister actually said, we're just getting rid of red tape and doing blue tape instead. Premier Harris said, that's exactly the point. And Frank got his way. And then as Cabinet, we knew what the ballgame was. We took Frank seriously, the committee work that he did. You had to get his blessing to get a bill through. And then after all those years, he kicked down 2,100 unnecessary government regulations. 15 red tape bills actually passed here in the Assembly. And an interesting thing about Frank, too, you think because he's not a big government guy, he had tremendous respect for the civil service. He actually compared reducing red tape to teaching elephants to dance. He says it's really hard, but when you get it done, it's an awesome spectacle. But Frank got it done, and I spoke with Bill Mantell, a current ADM who was one of the key people in the Red Tape Commission, respected civil servant. I said, Bill, why did this work? And he said, because 2 reasons. Frank didn't suffer fools. He wouldn't take no for an answer. He made progress. And if a minister was not following the line that Premier Harris laid out, Frank would end the meeting and walk out on the minister. Send a signal pretty fast. And it also gave ministers ministries an opportunity to actually get stuff done that otherwise they wouldn't. So there is tremendous respect for what Frank did in his leadership, not only at the political level, but throughout the civil service. One story I'll quickly tell, too. Frank and I almost had a huge fight. I probably would have lost that fight, because it's hard to think of another more determined, focused, and driven individual I've had the honour of serving with here in the Assembly, because our ridings came together in 1999. Here I was coming from Erie. Frank was Lincoln. The 2 ridings merged. A lot of MPPs fought. I said, holy crow, am I going to take on Frank Sheehan? How's that going to work out for me as a rookie MPP? And then Frank took me aside, put his arm around me. This conversation probably in early 1999, and he called me Timmy, like he was my football coach or something. He said, Timmy, you got a bright future in this business. I'm not going to run an Erie Lincoln. And besides that, somebody's got to take on that socialist in cowboy boots next door. And Frank took him on. And I think he gave Cormos a scare, too, which is, I think, an incredible thing, and maybe that debate continues somewhere else here today. My colleagues talked about Frank had a reputation for being gruff, tough-minded, determined, but they also talked about accurately how he had the big hearts and personal stories. There's a theme, too, that you pick up of the prodigal son, if you will, in Frank's good deeds. Wayside House, which helped recovering drug addicts get back on the straight and narrow. He was a big leader in the John Howard Society, so people who had been in prison to get back on the right path. Robert Land Academy is here today as well. I'm honored to serve on their board. This is for young boys who have wandered away to help bring them back. Frank was a regular guest there. In fact, the former headmaster, Scott Bowman, told me Frank would often tell the cadets some rather salty stories, but they loved it. And when the headmaster tried to censor Frank and look at his remarks beforehand, Frank Sheehan never listened. They loved him at the Robert Land Academy, and he was a guide for them, for a man of principle and the success he can have. The end of the day, too, I think what was remarkable was Jim mentioned his funeral, and there were people there from all walks of life, all political parties. There was a wake, lots of dignitaries there at the same time. And it's because we always have this image of the politician who is a generous and public person, the miser with their own. Frank was the absolute opposite of that. And he was that way not because government was bad. He just believed a lot of people didn't have much money left in their pockets after a lot was taken away. But he's also had a big faith in humanity, because Frank believed, too, if more people had money in their pockets, they would give generously just like he did. He was at his heart an optimist and loved people. So a lot of folks wondered, among all these dignitaries, who was going to make the big speech at the wake after the funeral. And Gore decided Frank wouldn't want that. In Frank's life, he always said that the good deeds speak for themselves. You don't wear them on your sleeve. And that's exactly the most important lesson of what Frank Sheehan has taught us. Frank's those good deeds. God bless. Thank you.